Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Given that the first film in this duology ended up becoming the highest grossing film of all time 13 years ago, the long-awaited and highly anticipated sequel has finally arrived in cinemas, but does it live up to the hype and deliver a worthy sequel, or does it disappoint? Since this is my most anticipated film of 2022, this is Kiri's Reviews, and this is my review of Avatar: The Way of Water. Seeing Avatar: The Way of Water in stunning 3D with a high aspect ratio of 191 which fills your peripheral with a high frame rate of 48 frames per second on the biggest cinema screen in the entire world, which is 32 metres wide times 23 metres high, at IMAX Melbourne with a sold out audience could not have served the film's immersion and stunning experience any better than it already has. As a person whose first M-rated film was the first Avatar film back in 2009, and as someone who has loved it upon many rewatches of all three versions that have come out since then, it goes without saying that my anticipation for Avatar: The Way of Water has been a long and exciting 13-year wait. Having seen the 3D 4K high dynamic range remastered version of the theatrical cut of Avatar in the same IMAX cinema earlier this year in September, even that couldn't brace me for the absolute jaw-dropping visuals, powerful story and themes, as well as such a divine world-building experience that Avatar 2 provides audiences with. To finally see the final product of James Cameron's work with creating new technology and capturing underwater sequences that fuse with groundbreaking CGI from the last 13 years of production ended up being such an appealing experience. Very rarely do I implore people to go see films in a specific format, but if you have access to seeing the high frame rate version of Avatar 2 in 3D, I could not beg you more to go out and let yourself be taken upon this immersive and awe-inspiring journey. The bigger the screen that you see this on means the more the wonder inside you will evolve, and if you have an IMAX where you are, go see it there. The biggest aspect of the Avatar duology is how advanced and realistic the visual effects are, and while the first Avatar film stunned audiences worldwide, hence its $2.9 billion at the box office, making it the highest grossing film of all time, the visuals of Avatar 2 surpasses its predecessor in every single way. My jaw felt like it was on the floor the entire time, with all of the underwater sequences blowing my mind, as I've never seen such a beautiful combination of vibrant colours, astonishing CGI, and seamless radiance in my entire life. The effort and skill that James Cameron has put into Avatar 2 over the last 13 years has proved to be worth the wait in every single way, as this film proves him to be the true master of creating better sequels by having Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Aliens, and now Avatar: The Way of Water to add to his successful directorial filmography. The visual effects are so breathtaking because of how realistic they look. Even though I don't know how these effects could have been created behind the scenes, I was in awe of every single sequence, so much so that I'd keep questioning if what I was watching was real. Seeing how far visual effects and its fusion with storytelling has come, even in the last decade or so, is truly astounding. While Avatar set the bar in 2009, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame really familiarized audiences with highly detailed CGI, particularly with the design of Thanos. But now, this film literally goes to such an advanced level of creativity that it's truly unbelievable. The realism in these effects get you so used to everything that's going on and how gorgeous it really looks. It gets to the point where you believe that this has been shot on a different planet. It's engaging and extremely convincing that I couldn't find a single shot that I didn't think looked believable. The underwater scenes were the parts of the film that I couldn't blink through, and I couldn't process just how overwhelming and immaculate those scenes were. In this field, it goes above and beyond the first film. While the visual effects are the key to the attraction for the Avatar films, the story is where both movies need to rely on too, because without a strong enough story, it just ends up looking gorgeous with no substance to it. While a lot of people can argue that the first movie had a very simplistic and forgettable plot, I can argue that the second movie had a much stronger storyline as it added a lot of depth to the emotional gravity of the characters, their unification and inclusivity within the different cultures. I wasn't expecting this movie to have as solid a story as it ended up having. While the ideas are very simplistic still, James Cameron has a way of expanding these small stories and is able to make them larger than life. However, the themes of family and staying united was a true surprise because it goes down some very emotional pathways and therefore captures the audience in a deeper span of attention that they unknowingly have invested themselves into dedicating to the movie. The character development is so much stronger and is definitely more meaningful because of this theme, and it really gave the plot more emotional stakes for the audience to stay involved with, unlike the first film. When it comes to admiring the visual effects as well as focusing on the story, it's a hard balance to juggle, simply because there is so much to admire, and James Cameron really has made a film that demands 2 watches in 3D. There were times where very emotionally driven dialogue and scenes were occurring that were integral to the progression of the plot, but sometimes I would find myself distracted by the realism of the water or the bright and colourful luminescent fish swimming within it. And while these effects are staggering to see, the story is able to hold its own as well, which brings together a more admirable balance than its predecessor. Avatar: The Way of Water exceeds its predecessor in every way and improves upon the impact that resonated with audiences for so long back in 2009. Even if you didn't like the first movie, this certainly is a much better film, and it doesn't just rely on stunning visual effects to keep you interested. The runtime is quite daunting at 192 minutes, but given how extraordinarily crafted this movie is, the story earns that lengthy runtime, but it never feels overlong or unnecessary. Unlike other 3-hour-long films, this one earns that runtime. I loved how the story took the focus from Jake and Neytiri and instead focused on the new generation of characters, which were the children of both cultures in Pandora. To see each of them be so distinctly different but still have such a unified impact was impressive, and I found these characters to be so much more entertaining than Jake and Neytiri, as they embraced more humour and fragility, as well as a powerful innocence that resonates within the story almost the entire time. While it's great to see some characters from the first film return, the newer characters seem to all enjoy a newfound independence, and because we were taken on that ride with them, the freedoms that they find out in the water leads to more personal and tear-jerking sequences that alludes to what these Avatar films are actually trying to convey to the people watching them. The first Avatar movie focused on saving the forests and preserving them, and while that wasn't as clear, Cameron has made sure that the preservation of the oceans and its animals is a key point in this film, so as to try and prevent more humans from tarnishing such beauty. That's what I hope ends up being one of the biggest takeaways from this film from anyone's perspective. Given that the score for the first Avatar film was composed by James Horner and he unfortunately passed away in 2015, rest in peace, there was a lot of pressure and expectations for Simon Franklin to honour Horner's legacy, and since they both worked together since 1997's Titanic, as well as completing Horner's score for 2016's The Magnificent Seven, the score for Avatar 2 was as perfect and as honourable as the first film. Sometimes pieces of music from the previous movie were reused, but it never felt out of place or unsuitable, but instead guided the feelings of the viewers to an emotional state that couldn't have been predicted beforehand. It accentuates the emotions that are used within the plot, and since it does get to very dangerous and desperate stakes, the music goes along with it, and provides an extra layer to what the film is trying to tell through its characters and story. You certainly feel the way you did if you ever got to see Avatar in cinemas in 2009 with Avatar 2, and while some of the music may not be as memorable as the Avengers theme and Harry Potter's theme, the familiarity with the music from the first Avatar still rings true and remains important throughout the sequel. Also, The Weeknd's new song that he made for Avatar 2, called Nothing to Lose, served as such a powerful final song that will resonate with people after having witnessed everything that has happened in the film. In relation to how the story is structured, Avatar 2 doesn't go down the typical cliched and conventional structure. While the movie definitely has cliches and plot conveniences throughout, the majority of it is very impressive. The first act is the only small issue I had if I had to nitpick at this film, given that the pacing was slightly off compared to the following 2 acts, but I was never bored or detached from what was happening. It just felt like it adopted a slower pace that it didn't necessarily need to, but once you get to the underwater sequences at the beginning of the second act, the rest of the movie goes past so quickly in a fashion that really earns the title of being a blockbuster. There is so much action that truly contains some of the most excitingly choreographed fights that I've ever seen put to film. The final hour is emotionally heavy, but that only gives the audience an action-packed third act to root for, as well as being beyond thrilled with how quick-paced it ends up being. It's really incredible to watch, and while the first act does contain action almost immediately, the quality and adrenaline that is packed into the final hour is easily one of the most insane parts of the entire experience. However, neither the first act nor the third act were my favourite parts of the film. Everything contained within the second act was where I found myself falling in love with each second of the movie, as it slows down for the audience to take in and admire just how advanced everything is in the film industry now, and to admire the subtleties of the visual effects, the heartfelt dialogue, as well as the commentary on preserving the oceans on our planet. This is where my recommendation to see it in 3D, regardless of which cinema you see it at, is so imperative. There is not and has never been a better cinematic experience than seeing Avatar: The Way of Water in 3D, and the second act proves to you why. The cinematography that goes along with the 3D visuals creates such a relaxing and jaw-dropping experience. If we disregard the core parts of the CGI, the cinematography still stands on its own as a beautiful canvas in almost every shot. The second act of the movie gives the audience time to enjoy and admire everything that the cast and crew have worked so hard on building in these last 13 years, and seeing it in 3D is the only way to truly appreciate it. The movie never feels like it's unworthy of the audience's attention because there is always something to admire about each scene in this film. One of the biggest plot points in the first Avatar was how much it switched to and from the human and Na'vi perspectives for Jake Sully, and to not have that in Avatar 2 was a relief because it made the plot here feel a lot more focused and on target for what it wanted to achieve this time around. However, it does jump back and forth from the good guys and the bad guys quite a lot, but it does it in such a way that gives you a decent amount of time with certain characters that it also doesn't feel like the story is forgetting about the others, and so the brilliant balance in giving each core character warranted motivations as well as an excellent amount of shared screen time, this never feels overwhelming or convoluted for the viewer. This is where the 3D also comes into effect well, because the 48fps version makes the visual experience very smooth and not as overwhelming as most 3D movies end up being, causing a hard to watch experience. But Avatar 2 doesn't have a 3D experience like that, as it works brilliantly with the high frame rate. Given that the first movie has built up a familiarity with the characters and the immersive world of Pandora so perfectly within the forests, when it comes to seeking out the way of water within the oceans, this is where both of the movies overlap in relation to story. Given that Jake had to be trained in the ways of the Na'vi and adapt to being a part of their culture and learn their ways of hunting and blending into their surroundings in the forest, the second film does that exact same thing too, but on a much larger and more pleasing way than the first film, as Jake's entire family are forced to learn the ways and values of the new tribe of Na'vi in this film. But these teachings go along with incorporating some of the movie's most touching sequences, its overall message, and the film's best cinematography. The world building that is expanded upon within Pandora in this sequel is beyond anything you could dream of, and it proves that James Cameron could truly bring dreams to life with creative and unimaginable sequences that are seen in this movie, to be considered as a new large step for the film industry, not only in the visual effects field, but the impact a few scenes of minimal dialogue can have on an audience. Since I have tickets to see this film again twice more, at least, once in IMAX like this first watch, but also in the normal frame rate but still in 3D next week, it'll be interesting to see how the different frame rates affect my different experiences with watching the same movie. Some reviewers have noted that some sequences look a lot like a video game, and while I can understand that to a certain extent with the 48fps, it'll be interesting to see how the presentation of this entire film is with a lower frame rate. High frame rate movies such as the infamous Gemini Man starring Will Smith back in 2019 weren't received well, given that it ran at 60 FPS in 3D and it took away the excitement of its action sequences, but somehow Avatar 2 finds a way to become the first great high frame rate film ever and is still able to capture such astonishing sequences in 3D without it feeling tiring on the eyes or sickening for some that can't usually handle the 3D experience. Without a doubt, the 3D experience enhances the scale of Avatar 2 in every way, and by denying yourself that 3D journey, the full impact of the film could never be replicated properly. Don't wait to see this on DVD or a streaming service. I encourage you to go and see it in a cinema in 3D while you have the chance. I couldn't imagine experiencing this movie in 2D when there are so many opportunities in 3D. The confidence that James Cameron has in the impact that this movie will have is certainly great for marketing his own film, but to some it has become quite annoying to the point where he's being established as cocky by saying that Avatar 2's effects are far superior to anything that's come from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as that people will be instantly wanting to see it multiple times. I personally think that that confidence can be misconstrued in many ways, but from my experience coming out of seeing it for the first time, I can guarantee that the visual effects are far more impressive than Marvel has ever created, and I admire Marvel's work with Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, but what's also funny in my experience coming out of the film is that I've already booked to see Avatar: The Way of Water twice more, and plan to try and see it even more. The fact that the movie has to gross $1.5 billion at the box office in order to break even and start gathering profit after filming Avatar 2 and 3 back to back, and now has commenced filming on Avatar 4, is pretty ambitious, but while it won't become the highest grossing film of all time and beat its predecessor, I think that it has a fair chance at reaching the $1.5 billion mark at the box office. I sure hope that since James Cameron usually has his own director's cuts for his films, that he has one for Avatar 2, because I'd love to see an extended version of this movie. Regardless of what you think of the first Avatar film, it changed the way that filmmaking was perceived in its craft, as well as breaking the record for the highest grossing film of all time, and that's without a doubt. However, Avatar: The Way of Water is one of the most impressive films of the year, and upon rewatches and the strength behind it within those repeat viewings, it has the potential to be my favourite film of 2022, but at the moment it remains in third place. The visual effects are beyond spectacular, but this sequel builds upon the first film and improves it in nearly every single way, providing for a blockbuster experience that truly keeps you captivated in a 190-minute runtime that feels like a mere 2 hours, but the action, emotion, character development and story are so much stronger here, and truly makes for one of the most entertaining films of 2022, while demanding the best and most immersive cinematic experience ever of seeing it on the biggest cinema screen possible in glorious 3D. It's definitely a spectacle not to miss, as I was in constant awe from beginning to end, so I'll give Avatar: The Way of Water a 10 out of 10. Thank you all so much for watching. Are you going to see Avatar: The Way of Water? Let me know below. As always, be sure to have a look at my previous reviews of Bones and All and The Menu. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Letterboxd and Instagram for all of my latest movie reviews. This has been Kiri's Reviews, signing off for now.
Don't forget to like, follow, and obey.